Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. All right, well, this is Terry, and you are listening to episode 125. I wanted to share a couple of things about the episode today. One is that I hope the third time is the charm because I re-recorded this episode now for the third time. Normally, when I do a solo episode, I do it in one take, but I lost a recording. And then yesterday, I did a whole recording without actually hitting the record button. I've heard that happening to podcasters before, but it was my first experience with that. So perhaps what I needed to say was meant to be caught in today's episode. I hope it serves you well. All right. Well, I want to introduce you to something I'm trying that's a little new, and it's called Tea with Terry. So I had invited all of you in my community to come and have coffee with me a few weeks ago, and many of you took me up on that opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your survey answers and your time with me to be able to check in and see what is serving you well, what's working, what you would like to see more of. And out of that came this idea of having a second short little email that is a vlog, a video blog, or a video email. And I wanted to explain what this is all about. So, Tea with Terry is just going to be a short video that's going to pop into your inbox once a week. And it's either going to be a T, a thought, an E, an emotion, or an A, an action that I want to talk about in that particular video. So if you're listening to this in real time, the first Tea with Terry dropped just a couple of days ago, and it was an action item. So if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, I want to invite you to be part of my newsletter community. Every Wednesday, I send what I learned this week out and talk a little bit about the podcast and whatever else is happening in my life. And that's where you'll find some of my offers for the things that I put out into the world and where you can get involved in my community and become a part of my community. And if you're not subscribed, you can go to the show notes in this episode or any of the podcast episodes. And once you hit those show notes, you're going to be taken to the episode page and you will be able to hit the subscribe to my newsletter button. And if you're not into Tea with Terry, if thoughts, emotions, and actions in a little video format is not working for you, you don't have to stay subscribed to that list. You can just stay on my Wednesday email list, whatever works for you. But I've been getting some great feedback from my first Tea with Terry moment. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. All right. Well, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast, and I am delighted to be here with you today. I have had so much fun the last few weeks sharing some really special guests with you. And today I'm going to do a solo episode. Right. Well, the thing I want to talk to you about today is this exploration I have been doing around midlife. So I think it was early December. I recorded talk about midlife, and I couldn't find it when I looked back. But I also knew that I wanted to kind of update it because this is a new area of interest for me. And so I have been enjoying following some new thought leaders, exploring, reading. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about this idea of midlife. So I think it's been bubbling up for me lately because even though I'm 63 and maybe traditionally I might be considered on the other side of midlife, there's been some changes in my life recently that have really highlighted these transitions that we typically go through in midlife, kind of these markers of midlife. So let's start with how do we define midlife? So it's interesting, but midlife actually stretches longer than you may think. all the way, they say, from like 35 to maybe 70. So it feels like 35 is really early, but it's when people start to experience some of the transitions of midlife. So, one of the ways that we mark midlife is these transitions, and there's lots of transitions around midlife. It can look like retirement, it can look like empty nest. It is often where women go through menopause and men go through male menopause. It can be a place where we start to cut back on work and start to prioritize new experiences as opposed to acquiring things. So there's lots of ways to note where we might be in midlife. And one of the things that happened for me is 3 years ago, I just celebrated 3 years of retirement. So I left my full time job and dived into coaching full time. And that transition really helped me recognize, wow, this is a new place where I have arrived. And it's really cool to see these experiences and these new things popping up in what is an atraditional retirement for me. And I think for many of us, as we live longer, as we work longer, we might look at this beautiful blend of work and passion project. So some of us might not be retiring, but we might be taking a step back from the number of hours we work or reducing the responsibilities at work so that we can pursue a passion, whether that's something that brings in income or simply a passion that adds joy to our life. One of the most interesting things about midlife that I've learned is that up until our 40s or almost 50, we're often in this state of acquisition. So we're really in those decades from when we first start working until, maybe 50 or a little beyond, acquiring things. We're acquiring maybe a marriage, a house, a higher position in our company, children, maybe a second home, and a portfolio, right? Stocks. And as we're acquiring, we can sometimes get sort of caught in that hustle and grind mode. And we have our culture and even our hormones kind of pushing us in that direction. So part of midlife is, as women, as we go through menopause and men go through menopause, we're seeing less input of that drive, of that hustle and grind momentum and culture. And this is why I think sometimes midlife might be stretched out a little bit, because now we're actually seeing like people in their 30s and 40s reducing work hours, letting go of some of the hustle and grind and focusing on other things. And so that natural progression of our time of life, our age, the way our body is functioning, that's a huge transition as well. And so it makes sense that we maybe stop acquiring things. And so what we get to do instead is we get to start to curate what's in our life. And I love that word curate, because if you think of a curated experience, you are looking at like a museum, the things they bring in and the things they take out. So, what do you want to bring into your life in this midlife place? And what do you want to let go of? And again, this is happening kind of naturally in this transition through middle age to midlife. And one of the things from one of the gentlemen that I've been following a lot, Chip Connolly, is this idea that midlife crisis is really misnamed. Instead, he calls it this midlife chrysalis, because there is a transition and a change. And we actually really do morph into
part of a new identity. And that's a beautiful place. And so to call it a crisis makes it sound as if it's all negative and that we're losing something and that we're out of control. But to call it a chrysalis, we really see that we are going into this midlife and maybe getting into that gooey middle that a caterpillar goes through while in the chrysalis. And we break down a lot of the barriers that were maybe holding us back from getting to know ourselves better, for getting to embrace life on our terms. And we come out the other side with a new awareness, a new beauty, a new way of operating in the world. The caterpillar walks on legs, the butterfly flies. And so this chrysalis is our opportunity to literally spread our wings. I don't know if that's a literal, but anyway, you get the metaphor, right? Metaphorically spread our wings is a better way to say it, right? Hello, I'm Terry. I always mix up my metaphors. And so I think it's really powerful to explore how can we move into this place of midlife transition with more ease and more awe and wonder. Like that's one of the things that I've really noticed is that these midlife transitions are starting to feel powerful. They're starting to feel like they're showing up for me. They're not being done to me. And so I think there is this place to recognize where we can absolutely get stuck in some grief. And that's okay. Anytime we're changing our identity, and a big change from a caterpillar to a butterfly, anytime we're letting go of something and embracing something else, there could be a bit of grief, and that's okay. I find this in our alcohol freedom journey. You may have experienced this as well, but often we're in this place where we are noticing that we're changing our identity and it feels with it comes a sense of loss. So when we are no longer drinking, we might be feeling like, "Ugh, I don't really know who I am if I'm not the life of the party. I don't really know who I am if I am not throwing the wine tasting dinner parties. I don't really know who I am if I'm not drinking. Am I no longer fun? Am I no longer lighthearted?" And so I think it's really powerful to look at all transitions in midlife with the awareness that there could be some adjustment. And we might feel a little wobbly at some of these stages, and that is okay. And it's okay to feel a little sad as we move through this stage. One of the things about that caterpillar that we realize is that in the chrysalis, we're kind of reduced to this gooey, messy muck. And so you might feel like you're in the messy middle. And where I think we're missing some of the mark is that we culturally, again, we've called this a crisis. And so when we start to look at it as a beautiful opportunity to embrace this new awareness of where we are, who we are becoming, what's in front of us, we can maybe release some of that messy middle and we don't have to stay stuck there. And part of not being stuck is to acknowledge how it feels to go through these transitions. One of the things I think we're missing is the opportunity to have more rituals built into this midlife. So, for example, one of the transitions that many of us go through in midlife is empty nest. And that for some of us might look like dropping our youngest off at college. And suddenly we're still a mom or a dad, but we're not really in it day to day. And there might be this big gap of how we used to cook breakfast, we used to do laundry, we used to drive this child around, we used to be there for them on a daily basis. And almost overnight, that can be gone. And so we go through these big transitions but we're not always acknowledging them in a way that is supportive and in a way that is acknowledging the beauty and the benefits of it. And we often are doing this alone. Lots of moms that I know cried themselves to sleep, the first month after their kiddos left for college. That's something that we can do better in supporting one another. First of all, we get to acknowledge it. Like, what does it mean to go through this? Where is the grieving process need to come from? Where's the beautiful recognition of what it means for me? And I think that if we had more ritual around this, it would be an easier transition. And then we could really acknowledge the beauty that is there. And we're seeing all kinds of beautiful things about pro-aging. I follow a woman who has a Instagram account called Aging Disgracefully, and I love that. Well, first of all, because it's really tongue in cheek. She's very graceful and athletic. But it's also this place of, oh, I can actually um, look at how I want to age in so many new ways. And it's not about necessarily never using a beauty product again or using Botox once a week. You get to do whatever works for you. But I think there is this beautiful place of accepting more of who we are in the world, acknowledging things beyond just beauty or, you know, um, ability, and instead wisdom. One of the articles that I read recently talked about how America does a terrible job of honoring our elderly. And in other cultures, particularly I think Japan, they were talking about, there is a culture around respect for elders because of their wisdom, their place in life, their experience, their knowledge. And I think America might be catching up a little bit with this idea of let's start to share more of our wisdom. One of the people I follow, there's something called Modern Elder Academy, where they're really looking at how do they offer courses and support for people in midlife. And I think it's so necessary and so beautiful. And so we're going to talk a little bit more next week about this powerful idea of grief and happiness and aging. And there's this beautiful idea of the U curve of happiness where we can actually get happier every decade. So I look forward to unpacking that with you as well. Let me know what you think of Tea for Terry. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch up with you next week. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.